July 8, 1941. Inside the German Navy's headquarters in Berlin, a routine encrypted message arrived from a U-boat patrolling the North Atlantic. Nothing unusual, just weather reports, convoy positions, and standard patrol updates. It was typed, as always, on a machine the Germans believed to be unbreakable, the Enigma. A marvel of engineering and mathematics, its constantly shifting electrical pathways produced over 150 trillion possible combinations. To the men who used it, Enigma was perfection, the voice of secrecy itself. But that same morning, hundreds of miles away, at a quiet English estate known as Bletchley Park, another man read that very same message in plain German. By the summer of 1941, Britain's codebreakers were reading the thoughts of the German Navy almost as quickly as Admiral Karl Donitz himself. And yet, through the rest of the war, even after Germany's surrender in 1945, the Germans never realized it. Not one of them. This is the story of the greatest intelligence failure of World War II, how a nation of brilliant scientists, engineers, and officers placed their faith in a machine, and never saw that their enemies were reading every word. To understand how this happened, we go back to Poland, 1932. Europe was tense but not yet at war. The German military had begun using the Enigma, a commercial cipher device adapted for secret communications. It looked simple, 3 rotors, each representing 26 letters of the alphabet. With every keystroke, the machine created a new substitution pattern. In theory, it was unbreakable. But inside Poland's cipher bureau, 3 mathematicians, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rosicki, and Henryk Zygalski, refused to believe any code was truly secure. Using intercepted messages, mathematical reasoning, and a small but crucial bit of intelligence from a French spy, Rejewski reconstructed Enigma's wiring and built a mechanical decryption device, the Bomba Kryptologiczna, or cryptologic bomb. For 7 years, Poland secretly read the German military's messages. But as war loomed in 1939, they knew their time was running out. That July, the Polish codebreakers shared everything, their findings, codebooks, and replica Enigmas, with Britain and France. When Germany invaded Poland that September, their nation fell, but their discovery survived. It arrived at a quiet English mansion called Bletchley Park, where mathematicians, linguists, and chess players gathered to continue the work. Among them was a young Cambridge mathematician, Alan Turing. Turing improved Rejewski's design, creating a faster, more automated version known simply as the bomb. By late 1940, Bletchley's machines, often operated by the women of the Women's Royal Naval Service, were decoding German Army and Air Force messages daily. But one branch remained a mystery, the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy. Their Enigma had an extra rotor and stricter security, and as the U-boats ravaged Allied shipping, Britain teetered on the edge of starvation. Then, in May 1941, fate intervened. In May 1941, the German submarine U-110 was attacked and forced to surface by the Royal Navy. Its crew abandoned ship, believing it would sink. When British sailors boarded, they discovered the Enigma machine and its codebooks completely intact. These materials became the key that allowed Bletchley Park to break the naval Enigma for the very first time. From that moment, the tide of the Atlantic War began to shift. Every night, intercept stations across Britain captured streams of German Morse code transmissions. These signals were sent by teleprinter to Bletchley Park, where hundreds of analysts worked in silence, turning what appeared to be random letters into vital intelligence. Each decoded message revealed something new: convoy routes, U-boat rendezvous points, minefield locations, even personal messages from officers at sea. The intelligence gathered from these decrypts was given the codename Ultra. It became one of the most closely guarded secrets of the entire war, known only to a handful of people at the highest levels of command. Winston Churchill himself once said, "It was thanks to Ultra that we won." Yet even as German losses grew, their faith in the Enigma machine never faltered. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, blamed their setbacks on improved Allied radar, superior aircraft, and bad luck, but never on codebreaking. His wartime diaries mention radar and detection devices again and again, but not once did he suspect that his encrypted messages were being read in real time. There were warnings, quiet but clear. After the capture of U-110, Captain Ludwig Stummel conducted an internal review and found serious procedural errors that could have compromised Enigma's security. But he dismissed the danger, insisting that the number of possible keys was beyond imagination. 2 years later, Swiss intelligence, officially neutral but highly observant, sent Berlin a report warning that the Allies might be reading German signals. The report, dated August 10, 1943, noted that Allied convoys and counterattacks seemed to happen with uncanny precision. Donitz read it and dismissed it as nonsense. "Impossible," he wrote. "Our cipher is mathematically unassailable." Meanwhile, at Bletchley Park, the silent war of logic continued day and night. By D-Day in 1944, British codebreakers were reading around 5,000 German messages every single day. Ultra-decrypts guided Allied convoys, revealed troop movements, exposed minefields, and even allowed the Allies to feed false information back through controlled channels, a web of deception that played a decisive role in the success of the Normandy invasion. To protect Ultra, Bletchley Park maintained absolute secrecy. Only a small circle of military officers knew where the intelligence truly came from. Reports were rewritten to appear as though the information had been obtained through reconnaissance or captured documents. If a convoy was saved, it was credited to luck. If a U-boat was destroyed, the Germans were told it was radar or improved tactics. The deception worked so well that even after the war ended, the Germans remained unaware. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Allied interrogators asked captured officers whether they believed their codes had ever been broken. Almost all said no. The few who had considered the possibility dismissed it as impossible. They trusted mathematics, and mathematics, they believed, had not betrayed them. In the years that followed, Admiral Donitz, who had briefly succeeded Hitler as head of state, stood trial at Nuremberg. There, he attributed the U-boat defeat to Allied radar, aircraft, and superior industrial strength, never realizing that the enemy had been listening to his every order. For nearly 30 years after the war, the truth stayed hidden. The men and women of Bletchley Park, bound by the Official Secrets Act, never spoke of what they had done. Their work remained classified, their achievements unrecognized. But in silence, they had changed the course of history, proving that in war, sometimes the greatest weapon of all is knowledge. Even the families of those who worked at Bletchley Park had no idea what they had done. For nearly 3 decades, their secret remained buried beneath silence. Then, in 1974, a British officer named F.W. Winterbotham published a book titled The Ultra Secret. It was the first public revelation that the Enigma code had been broken. The news stunned the world, but none were more shocked than the Germans themselves. At the time, Admiral Karl Donitz was 83 years old, living quietly in retirement near Hamburg. When told that the Allies had been reading his naval communications throughout the war, he reportedly refused to believe it. Only after being shown official documentation did he fall silent. After a long pause, he simply said, "Then everything we did was for nothing." 4 years later, in 1978, a remarkable event took place. At a conference in Germany, former German officers met face-to-face with the Allied codebreakers who had once worked at Bletchley Park. The meeting was polite and respectful, but beneath the courtesy lay immense emotional weight. The Germans expressed disbelief that such a vast operation could have remained secret for so long. The British, in turn, expressed deep respect for the discipline and brilliance of the men they had outsmarted. By that time, historians were beginning to measure the true impact of Ultra. Sir Harry Hensley, the official historian of British intelligence, concluded that the information gained from Enigma shortened the war by 2 to 4 years. Without it, the Battle of the Atlantic might have been lost, D-Day delayed, and millions more lives might have been sacrificed on both sides. For Germany, it was a bitter realization. Their greatest strength, their faith in logic, discipline, and order, had become their greatest weakness. The mathematics of Enigma had indeed been flawless. What failed was not the machine, but the human belief that it could never be undone. The true tragedy of that failure was not merely in the loss of ships or men, but in the failure of imagination. Throughout the war, German investigators conducted several internal reviews searching for leaks or weaknesses. Each time, they arrived at the same conclusion: Enigma was mathematically secure. They measured risk only through theory, never through evidence. When U-boats were sunk minutes after sending their coordinates, they blamed radar. When Allied convoys mysteriously avoided their patrol zones, they dismissed it as coincidence. The idea that the enemy could be reading every single signal seemed so absurd, it was never seriously tested. The British, however, learned a very different lesson: that no system, no matter how advanced, is ever truly unbreakable. They approached Enigma not as an impenetrable wall, but as a puzzle waiting to be solved. Their victory came not from machines alone, but from people, mathematicians, linguists, and clerks who blended logic with creativity, and patience with intuition. At its height, Bletchley Park employed nearly 9,000 people, 80% of them women. Most worked in silence, never knowing the full scope of their contribution. Some operated the massive bombs through the night, listening to the hum of endless rotors. Others translated decrypted messages, typing them on thin paper before they disappeared into sealed envelopes marked most secret. A few analysts made breakthroughs that changed the course of the war. Mavis Beatty, for example, cracked Italian naval ciphers in 1941, leading directly to the British victory at Cape Matapan. Yet none of them could ever speak of their success. Ultra's power depended entirely on secrecy, and if even a whisper of it had reached German ears, they would have altered their cipher systems overnight, destroying the Allies' advantage. To maintain that silence, the Allies sometimes faced impossible moral choices. There were moments when they deliberately allowed attacks to happen, letting ships go down, soldiers die, because to intervene would have revealed that Enigma was compromised. It was a brutal logic, a cold equation, sacrifice a few to save many. In this way, Ultra was not only a triumph of intellect, but also a test of moral restraint. Those who knew the truth could not always act upon it. They carried the burden of knowledge in silence, and in doing so, helped end one of the darkest chapters in human history. It was intelligence balanced against conscience. After the war, many of the men and women who had worked in secrecy at Bletchley Park returned quietly to ordinary lives, carrying a secret even their spouses never suspected. Some lived and died without ever being publicly acknowledged. Only decades later did the scale of their contribution begin to emerge, revealing that these silent figures had quietly shaped the foundation of modern intelligence. The revelation of Ultra in the 1970s forced historians to re-evaluate nearly every major campaign of the Second World War. What had once seemed like luck, daring, or tactical brilliance was often the result of knowledge drawn from Bletchley Park. The sinking of the Bismarck, the victories in North Africa, the containment of the U-boat menace, all were touched, directly or indirectly, by the work of the codebreakers. For Germany, this revelation triggered painful introspection. The archive showed that several individuals had, in fact, come close to realizing something was wrong. Signals officers had noticed that the Allies sometimes reacted too quickly to encrypted orders. A few mathematicians within the cipher office even suggested that operational mistakes might have exposed patterns. Yet each time, their reports were dismissed. The logic was circular. Since Enigma was mathematically secure, any evidence of compromise had to be coincidence. This revealed a deeper failure, the inability of an institution to question its own assumptions. German intelligence was filled with brilliant minds and advanced tools, but it lacked skepticism. Its analysts operated within a rigid hierarchy that discouraged dissent. The British, by contrast, encouraged the unconventional. At Bletchley Park, eccentricity was almost a qualification. Mathematicians, poets, chess champions, and crossword solvers worked side by side, united not by rank, but by curiosity. That culture of intellectual freedom proved decisive. In retrospect, the Enigma story is not only one of cryptography, but of psychology, the psychology of certainty. The Germans believed that perfect design guaranteed perfect security. The Allies believed that every design, no matter how elegant, concealed a flaw. One side worshipped precision. The other exploited imperfection. By 1945, the results spoke for themselves. 783 U-boats destroyed. 30,000 submariners dead, 3/4 of the entire U-boat force. Every loss that Donitz recorded as the work of radar or aircraft was, in truth, often guided by ultra-intelligence. Even when the U-boats changed tactics or shifted patrol zones, their communications betrayed them. Enigma did not fail them, their faith in it did. The irony is that Germany itself had a powerful signals intelligence unit, the B-Dienst, which had achieved early success breaking Allied codes. Yet even as they read enemy traffic, they never once considered that the enemy might be doing the same. When B-Dienst later lost access to Allied communications, they assumed it was due to tighter discipline, never imagining that British cryptographers had simply surpassed them. After 1945, as Western intelligence services absorbed the lessons of Bletchley Park, a new era began. Cryptography evolved from mechanical ciphers to electronic computation, powered by the very innovations first developed to attack Enigma. The principles of modern computing, automation, pattern recognition, algorithmic logic were born in those wooden huts in Buckinghamshire. Alan Turing's theoretical work during this period laid the foundation for what we now call computer science. But beyond the mathematics, the operational lesson was equally profound. The success of Ultra proved that intelligence could shape entire wars not merely by informing commanders, but by allowing them to act with near-omniscient awareness. And it showed something else as well, that secrecy, in the right hands, can be both a weapon and a burden. The success of Ultra depended on one thing: German ignorance. It had to be preserved, even at terrible cost. When Admiral Donitz finally learned the truth in the 1970s, his reaction revealed the human price of misplaced certainty. For decades, he had studied his war diaries, convinced that Germany's defeat was caused by overwhelming material odds. Now, he realized the truth: he had been outthought, not outbuilt. The bravery and sacrifice of the U-boat crews had been undone not by bombs or ships, but by information invisible, relentless, and unstoppable. In intelligence circles, the Enigma affair became a case study in analytic failure. How could an entire command structure ignore evidence so compelling? The answer lay in psychology. When a belief is collectively reinforced, contrary data becomes invisible. Donut's subordinates never dared question the assumption that Enigma was secure. When they investigated their losses, their conclusions always matched what superiors wanted to hear. Meanwhile, the Allies went to extraordinary lengths to protect their secret. They created alternative explanations for every victory, attributing success to radar, reconnaissance, or chance. They even staged missions to make these false explanations believable. The Germans' confidence was constantly reaffirmed by their own logic. Their misconceptions trapped them. By the late 20th century, historians began to see Enigma not merely as a wartime episode, but as a turning point in the evolution of information warfare. The conflict between belief and evidence, between secrecy and exposure, still shapes modern intelligence today. Encryption remains a contest between codemakers and codebreakers, but the real battle lies in the human mind, in the question of what we choose to trust. The Enigma story leaves behind 3 enduring lessons. First, technical perfection does not guarantee security. Every system depends on human vigilance. Second, secrecy, though powerful, carries moral weight, because its protection can demand silence even from those who deserve recognition. And third, intelligence, though invisible, can shape history as surely as any weapon. By the time the full truth was declassified in the 1990s, most of the original Bletchley Park workers were gone. Their legacy lived on in every modern computer, in every encrypted message, in every intelligence agency that studies both the code and the coder. The Germans never knew during the war. Many never lived to learn afterward. But history now records what they could not see, that the greatest battles of the Second World War were fought not only on land, sea, or air, but in the realm of thought. In the end, the Enigma affair is more than a story of triumph or failure, it's a mirror reflecting the nature of knowledge itself. The Germans possessed the finest technology of their age, but failed to question their own assumptions. The British, with fewer resources, succeeded because they doubted. In intelligence, as in science, progress begins where certainty ends. The war of machines became, ultimately, a war of minds, a silent contest where the loudest weapon was belief, and the deadliest weakness was confidence. The Germans never knew. And that ignorance, more than any Allied weapon, shaped the course of the Second World War.